Welcome to part 42 of Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, and in this episode we have the free reign to go to the guard station and get into the evidence room, except there's one problem. The card reader's still off, and the only way to turn it on is for an officer with authority to do so. One of those officers isn't here. The other one is currently in the detention center. So we're going to have to examine the card reader in order for us to continue on with the story. Now, here's the thing. This part is damn near 46 minutes long, and I apologize for that because it introduced new mechanics. Well, not introduced new mechanics, rather continually using the Luminol, but also introduced another mechanic by the end of the part. So on that note, I apologize for that. Because I told you this case is really goddamn long, and unnecessarily long. With that said, Officer Marshall just showed up as soon as we tried to activate the card reader. And nobody is going to pay attention to that liquor and hooch that's on top of the video surveillance equipment, which that shit could spill at any time and cause all of that to malfunction. I'm sorry, but you don't keep cheap hooch on top of a security system. Well, the card reader's now working again. He's not going to impede us in getting in. He doesn't want to speak to nobody because he does not want to talk about his past shame, which was the SL9 incident. So in order for us to actually get any sort of information out of him about that incident, you're going to have to give him the steak lunch. That is who that was for, obviously, because that's what Angel Star told you to do, and she knew he would be stubborn and not say anything. Now then, it's already been stated that he is a cowboy otaku. Also, so is his brother. Which would explain why they're dressed the same way. So now the steak lunch is permanently out of the the steak lunch is permanently out of the evidence. And by the way, he's still drinking. And that canteen is supposedly water in the English version, but in the Japan version, he's drinking alcohol, straight alcohol. Which, by the way, I kind of now see why he's been demoted. Anyway, it turns out he honestly shows little remorse for Meekins to actually being arrested. But he also revealed that the stabbing of Meekins' hand occurred when Jake Marshall wasn't there. And obviously Jake doesn't care about this job because he got demoted. Well, maybe if he wasn't drinking hooch, maybe he wouldn't be demoted. But he was practically heading on home at the time, and that was his alibi. I mean, you can't really understand what he's trying to say because of cowboy lingo, but quite frankly, he said he was heading on home at the time of the murder. And on top of the fact that he mentions that he does not know how to use the video equipment. Well, this guy constantly uses cowboy idioms, but in all honesty, he said his dream job was to be a detective, and the moment he got demoted, he lost that dream and he lost that flair. However, the DL signal, the SL9 evidence, that's what I meant to say. Wrong case, I almost mentioned. The SL9 evidence was all going to be eventually transferred. And therein lies the problem. Seeing as how Gant nonchalantly came in and came out with SL9 evidence, no less. Evidence transfers is what Jake was trying to stop. You see, here's the thing about evidence transfers. For those of you who are not aware of the law, after a case is closed, there's a certain statute of limitation for the evidence in that case to be used. If it is a cold case that needs to be reopened. And once it's closed for good, the evidence gets tossed out. Period. And that's where it will remain. And if anything about the case was not solved and there wasn't any evidence to use to solve, or the evidence that was used to solve the case was pretty much no longer needed, it's gone. And that's why Jake is so desperate to actually reopen the case and investigate, even though he's no longer a detective. I gotta say, this is a sad deal. But SL9 actually was first closed 2 days ago. But there was only two pieces of evidence out of a dozen. And that's the problem there. And also, there is the matter of people actually going in and going out. But here's the thing, he's lost all interest in the job, so he actually haven't gotten any sort of knowledge of how to work the system. However, there is an ID record. Now, there's something strange about this record. And that strange thing is what happened at 514. 514, Bruce Goodman's ID was used. And the number 498... Hold on. Let me see that again after he gets through shaving his beard with a knife. By the way, why is he shaving his beard with a knife? And by the way, I just realized also that some of the times I was still dozing off and I wasn't trying to. But you'll have to present Goodman's ID in order for to actually have him continue to talk. But there was 2 numbers there, and I do believe those numbers belong to Officer Meekins. Because one of those numbers, at 450, Officer Meekins went into the evidence room to get the evidence needed so that he could talk to Eric. Right there, 498-9596. That is Officer Meekins' number. And then the number on top was Edgworth's. Now the big question is, who in the world owns a number with all 7s? That one is a real mystery. So y'all pay attention to that number right there, because that's going to come into play. The number with all 7s. And honestly, if Goodman had his ID, there would be no reason for Goodman to put a knife out on Meekins. That is actually strange. But with that said, we're gonna have to go into the evidence room The door's open, actually. And that's what happens when you examine the door. So with that said, we got to move into the evidence room, and we're going to examine the evidence room and all the evidence in it. So, as you can see, there's a lot of things here. Wait, is that fishing pole? No, look! There's the fishing pole and the metal detector that was used during the DL6 incident. Nice call to detail. And unfortunately, Gumshoe scared the shit out of Emma. Now then, Gumshoe is probably wondering if he could borrow $50 from Gant. That's basically all he's worried about, is if Gant would loan him $50. Honestly, I wouldn't hold your breath about that. However, Gumshoe was put in charge of investigations. And as a result, it turns out that Gumshoe actually has a piece of evidence that has somewhat of a relevance to it, the scene of the stabbing. So we're gonna have to talk to Gumshoe before we actually continue on. And that's the weird thing. You were told that you could just go in without any problems, and all of a sudden Gumshoe's here. Gumshoe who practically hadn't had anything to do for the entirety of this part. And wait, did my controller die out or something? Oh God, it did. Damn it, I'll be right back. Well, sorry about that, folks. My controller was on the fritz this time around, but everything else is alright. From here on in, if there was any pauses or any jump cuts, it's because of the fact that I also had accidentally redid the process all over again, was distracted and forgot to pause the recording, or I fell asleep through the recording. Whichever one came first, so I cut out all the long dead pauses. But whatever the case, Gumshoe wants to take over the investigation because he didn't really have anything to do for the last couple of parts, due to the fact that Gant wanted to make him specifically off of this case because he's too close to Edgworth. But he wants to end the SL9 case so that, well, Edgworth would have something off of his shoulders, considering that Edgworth was presiding over that case and he was the prosecutor that got the criminal in jail. Meanwhile, the fact that you have to show off the ID means one thing. Gumshoe practically lost his ID, and his ID is, well, a detective's ID is basically one of the ways you can actually get into the locker. The other way is an actual fingerprint scan. And that's something that needs to be addressed. For you see, Gumshoe had made a lock for each locker. No, not Gumshoe himself, but rather Gumshoe pointed out that the police had these brand new state-of-the-art lockers that will only open with a fingerprint scan. Which is all the more reason why, if you look back earlier on with Jake Marshall and his lack of knowledge of technology, you'll realize that he probably made a big boo-boo mentioning that. But Gumshoe, at least for the most part, could actually get in. But again, Gumshoe mentioned that there's some people who didn't even know about these locks, so keep that in mind. Now, as far as for continuing the conversation with Gumshoe, you either show off the knife or the note. Doesn't matter which. Because Gumshoe will mention that these items had a connection with the SL9 incident, and Edgworth's first big case was the SL9 incident. However, that's the messed up part. Even though it was his big case, the SL9 incident was never seen on Trials and Tribulations. Furthermore, proof that this is only filler and was supposed to be, but you know how the HD version rolls. It's no longer filler. Anyway, Gumshoe has to remember all of these numbers anytime, any day. But also, you can hand him he has to remember those numbers on the ID card every time, every day. So that's probably one of the reasons why you handed him Goodman's ID. But if you hand Gumshoe the ID card list, Gumshoe will be emphatically surprised. The second number. The second number is Edgeworth's number. So on that note, you'll have to inform Edgeworth about what's going on and why was he in the evidence room. Man, Gumshoe being so close to Edgeworth kinda knew exactly what it is that belonged to Edgeworth. Even his his ID number actually. So apparently prosecutors actually have access to the evidence room, seeing as how they work closely with the police. But there is something hanging in that locker, and we don't know who. Excuse me 1 second. Sorry about all the background noise, ladies and gentlemen, but anyway, there is a piece of evidence hanging out. Now, will we actually have that locker full of evidence? No. Not yet, at least. We still got other things to examine. And now that I stop and think about it, there was something that I was forgetting about this case. Something very important. I can't quite put the tip of my finger on it. I do know that we ended up picking up a glove, and that's actually helpful. If the glove is able to print whoever it was in the evidence room, we'll be able to catch him. Anyway, Gumshoe pretty much mentioned that the gloves came from a previous case, which is the SL9 incident. Now, all we need to do is just take a closer look, and this will be the main reason why this game is, well, I should say this part is actually 45 minutes long. You're practically putting together a broken statue. Said broken statue may end up costing you a victory. Not costing you, it actually may end up giving you a victory. It all depends on when and where you release this vase. Pretty sure there's a certain part that the actual game would call for something like this. And that's if we actually find out what happened to the last piece. Then, more importantly, it will be complete and we won't have to worry about what'll happen if it wasn't, because once we solve this case, well, yeah, it may go into archives, but at least for the most part, it can be held to be used against the criminal. Now, what I'm doing here is plain and simple. I'm going into the numerical order, which basically is 6, 7, 8, 1, 3, 4, and we've got one more piece. We gotta wait for that one, and the last piece should be going here. That should be the 48th birthday of Madonna, and there's the rest of them. And we basically have all the pieces together for now, until the other one is revealed. But for now, we've got enough, well, we don't have enough evidence yet to save Meekins, but we do have enough evidence to understand our position against Meekin. So on that note, that base is going to be a part of our evidence. But we're not done just yet. We still got a few more things to investigate, and that's where the Luminol comes in, ladies and gentlemen. The Luminol will reveal the fingerprints that was last left on this monolith. And we also have the map, which will mark the location, or no, that's not the map, oh sorry, that's actually the jar itself that took a close-up and is going to bring up the fact that there's blood spots on the jar. I don't think you'll be able to actually do anything with that later. You will eventually. So on that note, I do believe we still have other things we need to do. Like, for instance, spray the door, because that red blood spot is kinda irking me. Hold on one second, I gotta step off for a minute. With so many interruptions, I apologize for that. This time, my cat was foolishly pulling out my microphone from out of my computer, and I don't need that. That's why I stopped what I was doing. Because I caught him about to do that shit. Now anyway, spray the Luminol right where those broken pieces were, and you'll find out there's a whole pool of blood there. That is enough to look like, that is enough to look like a murder scene. However, that would be enough to actually know that there was a violent scuffle that happened, and it was violent enough for blood. Speaking of which, that blood that was on that locker room, yeah, examine that, by the way. And Gumshoe ends up pointing out the locker that has the blood on it is literally his. But Gumshoe wasn't even here. I mean, he was here, but he wasn't by his locker room. So on that note, we'll have to actually mark that down on the map too. And then there's another patch of blood around here. It's right here. Now this blood is definitely important. Well, the other patch of blood is too, but this one more so than the other patch of blood. As we don't know whose locker that is. One thing is perfectly clear. Somebody had accidentally put their hands on that locker and looks like they tried to clean it off. And Gumshoe is so desperate to want to know where the Luminol came from, seeing as how she got it mail order. Still, I think we've got everything. There's one last thing we need to do, and that is to also talk to Gumshoe. Although there was supposed to be another blood spot around here. Oh wait, no, there's no other blood spots. That's in Edgeworth's office. So on that note, I do believe that there's nothing else for us to examine here. I'm just showing you that there's nothing else here. Hell, there's even paint. So we're gonna have to talk to Gumshoe. I mean, there's nothing else to present, and the only way we're gonna actually move on is if we... Oh god, I left. What was I thinking? I accidentally jumped the gun. I was supposed to talk about the incident with Gumshoe right after I went there and sprayed the Luminol. But here I am coming into Edgeworth's office. And that was kind of a stupid move. No, that was a definite stupid move on my part. I think I jumped the gun here. We have to actually wait till Gumshoe acknowledges that Edgeworth is out of his meeting before we even come here. So I jump back to talking about the SL9 incident with Gumshoe. And it was a serial killing. Yes, that's right. The serial killing that happened throughout the entirety of 2 years ago. And Edgeworth practically found out the killer's whole entire motive with just one slip up from the killer. So with that said, if it wasn't for Edgeworth, Edgeworth would not have, well, the killer would not even be arraigned, let alone arrested. I mean, they would have eventually caught him, but right after he killed somebody else. Oh, and by the way, that pamphlet that's on the back of whatever kind of important message that Gumshoe was going to give to Edgeworth, that pamphlet actually is a clue and also a precursor to a trial that is happening way in Trials and Tribulations. So that is actually the new thing that... I'm not sure if that's the new thing or that's this game trying to be canon, but that is the actually new thing that the HD version bring along, is that Edgeworth ended up having a brochure to a French chef. I forgot what that chef's name is, but he is in the case where you are trying to prove Maggie's innocence again. Only this time, Maggie was thrown up the river and was poorly defended by what was essentially Phoenix Wright, except it wasn't. We'll get there when we get there. But Edgeworth shows up, and Edgeworth said that the inquiry committee has let him off the hook again. However, the flyer on the flyer in the front was supposedly a passcode, basically, like Gumshoe trying to secretly give Edgeworth clues without being noticed by Gant. And let's be honest, it is a communication error that Edgeworth ends up being blamed for. And his reputation really made it to where there's not much he could get away with. There is some, but not much. Well, They went and gave control of the investigation away from No, they gave away all of Edgeworth's control over the investigation to the police department. Meaning Gant is in charge of any further investigation. And if he's as shady as he seems, that's not a good thing. So now we're going to have to present, I do believe, the DLC items. I mean the SL9, sorry. First, let's also present that over to like the ID card list over to Miles, and let him see that you were in the evidence room and try to ask him what he was doing. And Edgeworth is tired of being criticized about him being accused of murder, so he at least comes clean at the fact that he was actually giving Edgeworth evidence that was going to be put in the transferal because the case was already closed. And Gant was like, don't ask questions, just deliver. So basically that's what he did. On that note, Edgeworth basically is trying to cover up the fact that that screwdriver had absolutely nothing to do with the case, except it's SL9. Meanwhile, Edgeworth pretty much is a little bit peeved that we gotten some evidence to try to do something about this case. But it's gonna be a long and hard and arduous road, because Gant is one of those people that tries to flex his power and his privilege. And we need to actually talk about Edgeworth's allegations of forgery. Quite frankly, he ended up sending a convicted man to jail on a murder he actually didn't commit. On top of the fact that Gant was also in charge of that as well. And even though Edgeworth wrapped up the case and sent the man to death row, it was Gant who actually apprehended him in the first place. But whatever the case, at least for the most part, Edgeworth is alright, and Edgeworth practically reveals that yes, he has a code of honor. And now we're going to actually get a new surprise from Edgeworth. Edgeworth would give us probably the most useful thing out of this entire game. And that is the fingerprint ammonia. And that's supposed to actually smooth out your fingernails. Or, no. Not smooth out your fingernails. That's supposed to take, okay, sorry, let me try this again. You're supposed to sprinkle the dust on and use the dust to find fingerprints. That's all it does. However, we're going to actually put that to good use, because now we have the means to further investigate the locker room area in the evidence room. So on that note, that's what we're going to do. And I think there's two places that needs not only luminol but dusting. So we're going to have to actually put the glasses back on so we can see who needs to have their fingerprints dusted. However, we are starting off with the right hand, which was continued, and also due to the fact that that right hand also has a, it's also, how should I put it? That right hand also has a few smidgens on it, so we're going to try to see if there's actually a hand there, and if the victim of said murder tried to grab something before he died. So let's sprinkle some dust onto this thing and we will find our culprit. And also for the record, you're practically going to be trying to find the fingerprints in a needle in a haystack. Now here's the thing, there is a way you could do this the easy way, but it's probably going to take longer because of the rendering time. You can just pour luminol all over the place if you want to. There is no limit to how much dust you can use. In fact, just keep spraying until you actually find something, like this thumbprint. And unfortunately, just like the thumbprint, the fact that gloves were worn speaks volumes, especially if gloves had put thumbprints onto the locker room area right after something happened to the doctor. So on that note, we need to examine a finger right here. So on that note, that's what we're going to do. Let's see, we had dusted the prints, we need to dust some more because they're not coming out clean. My big advice to you, put on as much of a pride as you possibly can to dust for fingerprints. Because, like me, you'll never know exactly how far you could jump in this game without having to worry about going through the procedures of finding the fingerprint, when all you can just simply do is just splat fingerprint solution all over the area and then like eliminate it. I mean, that sounds simple, but it still is garbage. That this particular minigame, plain and simple, is one of the reasons why this case is really long. You'll be taking multiple, and I repeat, multiple finger scans later on in the game. Now we need to actually match these fingerprints. And if we match the fingerprints, sorry about that if I'm not too close, then we actually can pinpoint exactly what's going on and who was there. But seeing as how I didn't do that, I just wasted a little bit of time accidentally jumping the gun. Marshall is not the guy whose fingerprint is on that locker. I totally forgot Dick Gumshoe's locker is going to have Dick Gumshoe's fingerprint. However, we couldn't find a match to the fingerprint that was on the bloody fingerprint, so therefore we really couldn't actually do anything about it because of the fact that the person was wearing a glove at the time. Now, if there was a way to actually find a fingerprint on the glove, on the other hand, because you do have to put your gloves on. If there was a way to find a fingerprint on that glove, we would have got an open and shut case. Meanwhile, we're going to have to go to the locker with the piece of cloth hanging out of it, and we're going to have to spray some luminol on it. And And that's the only way we're gonna continue on with this. Oh, we're not gonna spray, sorry. We need to actually... Okay, no, that's not what I want to do. We'll have to get the luminol, but we will have to examine the handprint that is on the locker. So I guess we need to, or examine the locker itself. That's what we need to do. Because we can't really see the handprint because we're not wearing the purple glasses at this time. But we will. Oh, we will. More importantly, we're going to have to find out if this bloody handprint actually did have some fingerprints. Because if it did, we'll find out who it was that was trying to erase that bloody handprint off of the locker. And we'll try to find out whose locker that is too. So on that note, we need to go a little bit outside of the handprint, because that's where we'll find all the magic. I mean, it should be... Let's see, is it going to be glowing around here? Oh, well, I'll just make sure I try to get it. Let's examine. I should skip this part because I accidentally made a mistake. I should have actually, like, discovered it and just went there and answered the question, but I didn't. So I had to redo that all over again. And we have to go right here and reveal whose prints these are. And if they are the prints of who I think they are practically going to be on the spot come the trial. So all we need to do now is dump as much as we can around this problem area the minute we can. Alright, now that we've got a decent enough of a coating... Oh my god, I accidentally backed out! Ah, god damn it. Okay, now we got it. Let's put a little bit more of a coat on here, and then we'll blow it all away, and we got ourselves a fingerprint on the first try. Now let's match that to Jake Marshall. Seeing as how he was one of the people at the evidence room security, it could have been him. So, with that said, Officer Marshall is indeed complicit in this too, because his handprint was found on the locker. This probably would be a fatal move for one Jake Marshall, because that means one absolute truth. He was in the evidence room trying to take evidence so that he would not be tried. That is what he was... Not he would not be tried. No, he was trying to take evidence to reopen the case. That's what it was. Somebody else was trying to take evidence so that they wouldn't be tried. Jake is taking evidence because of the fact that he wants SL9 to be solved, and he's going to do it his way regardless of the law. And whatever the case, ladies and gentlemen, I will see you guys next time at part 43 when we start trial 3. And it's going to be a long one too. Not by any fault of mine either.